1979. The first thing I'm going to talk about is 1979 Christmas. So we had a whole family here, children, daughter-in-laws, grandchildren, and started coming on. For Dwayne and his family, the first ones to come on Friday night, and they kept coming till some of them didn't get here till Monday afternoon. I think Chris and Lynn was the last two to get here, so Chris had to conduct a funeral service on Monday afternoon. Well, I was telling you a little bit about our 1979 Christmas. This is January the 1st, 1980, not very many days after. Should all be fresh in my mind. I guess I telling you about who all was here, and we had our Christmas on Christmas Eve. Everyone was here. Folks had brought food. I bought a ham, and we had a lot of good fellowship, a lot of good food. A real nice Christmas, considering all the sadness that we've been through. Alice had passed away October the 8th. And so on Sunday, on Tuesday, well, they all had to go home. So we went over to the cemetery. Recently got the monument put up, and several of them hadn't seen it yet. So we went over there and put some flowers in the vases, and then practically all of them went home from the cemetery, went right on to their various homes. Curtis and Dwayne come back here. Curtis and Gwen come back here, and Gwen, she done a lot of cleaning and washing and so forth before they left to go back to Omaha. So all in all, it was a very nice Christmas, considering of all the sadness. We certainly missed Alice not being here. And Kathy and Scott, they're in California. They've been here for Thanksgiving, but had to go back. Chuck and I, we'd been here and spent a weekend just 2 weeks before. And then they went to his folks over at Rantoul, Illinois, to spend Christmas Day over there. Well, I think I'll tell you a little bit about Livingston. Over at the cemetery where our lot is and where Alice is buried. They used to be quite a village there before the railroads come through. There was of course, the schoolhouse and the church, Franklin Baptist Church, and the grocery store was there. And there used to be a coal mine there, and a lodge hall, and blacksmith shop, and 3 or 4 houses in the area there that was called Livingston. Of course, they're all gone now except the church and the cemetery. And the church hasn't had any services in it now for quite a while. I went down the other day and mowed the grass around it, and mowed some around the road out in front of the cemetery, and kind of cleaned up around there a little bit. But it's quite an old place. The old post office that is over there on the hill where Ballingers live now and it is still standing, although it's in pretty bad condition. But it was a post office there long before there was ever any rural routes or any railroads through here. I don't know. I've got some letters here that was sent to the Livingston post office in the 1860s. So evidently it was a village way back then. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about when I joined the church. Franklin Township had 3 active churches when I was in my teens, and the Christian church over south of where I live now, the Methodist church up where the water tower is now, and then the Baptist church. I imagine the Baptist church probably is the oldest one of the group, and the attendance would run all the way from 20 to 50 probably back in those days at each one of those churches, because the roads weren't very good, and people didn't go out of the community to attend church then like they often do nowadays. When I joined the church, I was converted in the Methodist church. They had their church, their services in the afternoon. Baptists had theirs in the morning, Baptist and Christian. And so I went to the Methodist church about as much as I did the Baptist church as a whole, because there's some young fellows up there kids that I run around with, that's about the only social get-together we have during the week, was up there at the Methodist church in the afternoon. This time I was going to tell you about the time I graduated, I think, which was several years, 4 or 5 after I'd been converted to the Methodist church. I hadn't joined any church. So they had a big revival meeting here at Livingston, and they rented a tent and put it up right north of where the church is in the grove there, and all 3 churches went together and got this minister and come up there and put on this revival meeting, and a lot of people attended from a distance away, and a lot of people were converted to this meeting. And then when it was over, why, you could join any church that you wanted to, church of your choice of those 3. So at that time I joined the Baptist church and was baptized in a pond out in a rural area. I think there's about 40 or 45 was baptized at the same time that I was out in this rural pond. At this meeting, it was conducted by Bill Pollock and his son Floyd. Floyd led the singing, was a real good singer. Had bridge planks put up for a platform, and that's where he preached. The choir was on this platform, and it consisted of probably 20, 25 people from the 3 churches, and Alice and Renita Parson, it was then, Poffenberger now. They played 2 pianos, played the same song, both played. And of course, that was unusual for those times. A lot of people never seen 2 people play a piano together like that. And I think maybe some of them come to enjoy the music more than they did the preaching and the service. And so it was quite a thing. And some of the people that were back here that lived around here at that time still talk about that big revival meeting they had at Livingston back in, it must have been somewhere around 23 or 24, I'm not sure which, but about that time. got one little incident I want to sandwich in here that has kind of stayed with me through the years. Uh, Years ago, before I was born, there wasn't very many fields that was fenced in. The settlers would have a few acres fenced in, and the rest of their farm was wide open spaces. Well, when people wanted to sell their livestock, they'd drive them to market. From here, they'd drive them to Ottumwa, which I suppose in those days was more than 50 miles. It's about 50 from Centerville now, but the way they'd have to go then is probably 75 or 100. They'd start a drive, and there'd be 3 or 4 fellows go, and then some of these fellows would take some money with them, and they'd buy and add too. If they're driving cattle, they'd buy, some fellow had 1 or 2, they'd go out and meet this drive and sell his cattle, and they'd pay him for them, and then they'd put them in with their bunch and take them on to the market, wherever it happened to be. Well, this fellow lived up toward Seymour, and he drove his cattle down through this area here and met this drove and sold his cattle, and they paid him in gold. There wasn't any paper money then, and so they paid him in gold, and on his way home, he lost his money, crawling through a fence or something, and so he come back a day or 2 later looking for it and telling people along the way about him losing this sack with these gold coins in it. So it went on for some time afterwards. I don't know whether it was a matter of months or whether it was several years. And one of my grandfather's brothers come running up through the lot. They lived a mile and a half west and just a little south of where I live now. And waving his hands and hollering, "I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich." And he'd found this sack of with these gold coins in it, and which he was rich in those days. I don't know how many head of cattle this fellow had sold to get that money. So my great-grandfather Jacob, he went down to this boy to see what he had, and sure enough, he said, "Well, that's I'll call the man Jim Smith just for lack of knowledge and knowing what his name was." Said, "That's Jim Smith's money. That's not your money." So they sent word to Jim Smith to come down and claim his money. So he came down and claimed his money, and he took a coin out and was going to give it to this boy for finding it. My great-grandfather said, "Nobody pays one of my boys for being honest." He said, "If you give him a coin, our friendship ceases right now." That's certainly a contrast to the way people look at things like that today, isn't it? Well, I think I'd be falling way short if I didn't tell you a little about our wedding, time of our wedding, March 1926. Alice and I had gone together for about 4 years. During that time, we taught school, and Alice had gone part of the time. She'd been in Centerville working at the telephone office. She went to summer school. She graduated at Unionville, Missouri. That didn't qualify her to teach in Iowa, so she had to go to summer school to get an Iowa certificate. We was married in 28th of March, 1926. Probably about a month before we was married, I went to Centerville and bought a 24 Model T touring car. It'd be about 2 years old, and I gave about $200 for it. I'd saved up the money at teaching school and saved up some more money to buy furniture and so forth with, and take a trip. Well, about the time school was out, why, we stayed over at Alice's folks till school was out. I was teaching at the Antioch, and she hadn't taught that year. She'd stayed home to make preparations to get married. She always said that she had to learn to cook during that time. She'd never learned to cook before that. Well, we didn't get started on our wedding trip till about the 1st of June. So we went down to her grandmother's and stayed all night. Took off the next morning to go to Kansas City on our first leg of the trip. And we went down to Kansas City. Stayed all night one night before we got to Kansas City. Forgot what the town that is now. But anyway, we had a tent fit over the top of the car. We had a box on the back of the car. We had some cooking utensils. We had a gallon bucket with sand in it. And we'd put a pint of gasoline in that sand. And we had skillets. We'd cook our eggs and bacon and potatoes, anything we wanted to cook. That pint of gasoline would cook a full meal. And we had a water jug with us. We had a little light that we could snap onto the dash of the car and run that out so we'd have a little light in our tent that fit on the side of the car. And we had sent to Montgomery Ward and got a double cot, camper's cot, a double, and it didn't work so good because I was quite a little bit heavier than she was, and I'd be down in the hole and she'd be laying up on a hard part of this camper's cot. But that's the way we camped anyway. And we went down to Kansas City and we stayed down there a day or two, and then we drove out to Manhattan. Stayed all night the first night out of Kansas City. We went there to let's see, I'll have to stop and think a little bit. Well, Abilene. Alice's grandmother had a brother. His name was Henry Buchner. They spelled it Boughner. They lived in Abilene, and he was an officer in the bank there, pretty well fixed. We went there and stayed all night, and that was the first time in my life that I'd ever took a bath in a bathtub. The house was completely modern, and I took a bath in the bathtub. It was adjoining the bedroom that we stayed in, and it wasn't but one bathtub in Franklin Township at that time. That was in the house that's up there, the first house east of the water tower here in Franklin Township now. Of course, I'd never been up there, so I'd never taken a bath in a bathtub till that night. I never will forget that. And then we left there in a day or two and went on out to Salina, Kansas. Then we went north out of Salina 10 miles to Warren Davis. Warren Davis was a brother to my grandmother Condra. And my dad had been out there when he was a young man and worked. He told us where they lived. Well, I told Alice, I said, well, we'll go, and if they seem friendly, why, we'll stay all night. And if they don't, we'll come back here to Salina and stay all night and set our tent up and stay all night here and go on from there. Well, we got out there and they give us such a warm welcome. They wanted us to stay 2 or 3 days and help them thrice. So we did. If I remember right, we stayed 4 days. I run the grain wagon, scooped wheat. When we got ready to leave, well, they paid me $4 a day, which was twice as much as I could have made here at home for running the grain wagon. And besides the fellowship and the friendship and the acquaintances that we made, and have retained those acquaintances clear through the years. From that time till even yet today, I correspond with one of Warren's daughters, Mrs. McCullough. They live in Nebraska now. So I was there 3 or 4 days, and we left there and went on out to Russell, Kansas, to Jake Buffner. That's another brother to Alice's grandmother, Condra. And they were just developing an oil field around Hayes at that time. And he had a little old Chevrolet, and he drove us around over the country, and we stayed there a day or two, and left there and went down to Hayes, Kansas, and spent the 4th of July at Hayes, Kansas, and had horse races, and I don't know, quite a celebration. And we left there and went on out to Colorado Springs, and we stayed there, I think, about 3 or 4 days. Went up top of Pikes Peak, and Pierce Arrow cars, open models, no closed models, Pierce Arrows. You pay so much for the trip, they take you up there, and as soon as they had a car load, bring you back. I forget what it was. I think it was about $5 a piece, I think. And so we was there 3 or 4 days, and then we went from there on up to Denver, Colorado. Alice had an aunt. Her name was Ruth Gray in Denver, and that's all we knew. She just lived in Denver. We didn't have any address or nothing. So we pulled up to a filling station, and I went in and found their name in the phone book and called them up. She was at home, and we wasn't only about 3 blocks from their house, and that don't happen when you go into a city like Denver very often. So we went up there and we stayed there probably 2 or 3 days, and her husband was unemployed at that time, and she had worked in a ladies store where she altered clothes for ladies, and she wasn't employed right at that time, so she went with us and took us around Denver quite a little bit to see the sights. We left there, went north up toward Cheyenne, Wyoming, and so we decided that we'd heard that there's going to be a big rodeo in Cheyenne, and about 10 or 12 governors from various states in the United States was going to be there on a certain date. And I said, boy, I'd sure like to go to stay for that rodeo. Well, it was about a week away. So I said, well, I might get a job and work a few days, and then we go to the rodeo. So we was driving along and saw a place where they had 2 thrash machines. I said, well, I'll bet this fellow must have quite a lot of work to do. We'll stop here. So we stopped, and that was close to Nunn, Colorado. So we stopped there and waited till the men come in from the field, and he hired me. Went to work that afternoon, I think. We stayed set our tent up in a little cabin, and that had a stream that run from Long's Mountain down into a reservoir where they had anticipated to use for irrigation, but they never got that far along with it. And they're the biggest mosquitoes around there that I ever saw in my life. And that water, even though it was a long ways from that mountain, was cold as ice. I'd come in of a night and go down that stream to take a little bath, but boy, I didn't spend much time down there. The water's too cold. The mosquitoes are so bad that we had something we turned into rags, and we'd light a rag, and it wouldn't blaze. We'd just let it smoke. That smoke would have a tendency to keep the mosquitoes away. Well, we stayed there and worked for about a week, and then we left and went on up to Cheyenne to this rodeo. And on all this trip, there never was a time that we drove much over 100 miles in any one day. We wouldn't leave very early in the morning, and we'd camp pretty close that night. There wasn't any such thing as a motel, and we had to carry our food with us, and so we'd stop and cook a meal, eat some fruit, and usually stay at what they call tourist camps. About every town. We left the Black Hills, this old Model T, and went down through the Black Hills, and there wasn't any faces there then. See, that was in 1926. Went through the Black Hills and camped there maybe 1 or 2 days. Went from there on to Spencer, Iowa. And while we was gone, we left here in the 1st of June. And during the last of June, my sister got married, and her husband lived at Dickens, right east of Spencer. So we went there and went to their place and stayed a day or two. Then we, maybe 2 or 3 days, then we left there and come on down to Des Moines. And we camped out at the fairground. It was before the fair, but it was August by that time, and about time for the fair to start. It was well in August. Camped out there, and then the next day we went up to Ginsburg's and bought the most furniture that we'd ever seen. We'd saved money for quite a while, and I had this school to teach at Numa. So we bought it and they shipped it down by freight to Numa. And I got my dad's team and wagon, went over there and hauled it from the depot down to the old house we rented. And that furniture was worth at least twice what the house was. We couldn't find a house in Numa that was actually fit to live in. And we had brand new rugs and brand new floor lamp and brand new this and that and the other. The floor lamp, I remember, it cost $45. We bought about $800 worth of furniture, which for those times was elaborate. Some of the people over around Numa amused yet. And in fact, Condra down here was telling about her mother. Said that she come to our place one time and she got scared to come in because she'd never seen that nice of furniture. But it's been a very beautiful day. Went to church today, and this afternoon I slept a while, and then I got up and went over to the cemetery and visited Alice grave a few seconds, and come back and stopped and talked to Edith a little bit, and had a letter from Effie lately, and we discussed that a little bit. So then I come on home, and I've been reading all evening, and I got to give the Bible study lesson one of these days, and I read over a portion of it. It's a new book that we're just starting on. It's called Maturity in Christianity. It seems to be pretty good. It's pretty deep thinking, some of it, but maybe it'll do us all good. Bye.